Good evening from New York. I'm John Hayden. We have some big breaking news. There are moments in geopolitics where a single sentence changes everything. Not a missile strike, not a sanctions package, not a back-channel diplomatic cable, just a sentence. And this week, that sentence came from Donald Trump, posted with the kind of bluntness that makes diplomats wince and voters stand up straight. He read Iran's response to the American nuclear proposal, and his verdict was immediate. Totally unacceptable. No softening, no diplomatic cushion, just the cold, direct language of a man who has decided that the era of being polite to regimes that mock American power is over. That moment, that sentence, is what we're unpacking today, because what's happening between Washington and Tehran right now is not just a news cycle. It is a defining test of whether American resolve still means something on the world stage. To understand why Trump's rejection landed the way it did, you first have to understand what Iran actually put on the table. And when you look at it closely, it becomes clear why the response was treated not as a negotiating position, but as an insult. Iran's proposal reportedly sought compensation, meaning they wanted to be paid. And it included provisions that would have handed them effective control over the Strait of Hormuz, one of the most strategically critical waterways on the planet. Roughly 20% of the world's oil passes through that strait. Giving Tehran influence over it would be like handing an arsonist the keys to a fuel depot. Beyond that, the proposal failed to address the core demand that has defined American policy for years: uranium enrichment. According to reporting from the Wall Street Journal, the deal did not commit Iran to ending enrichment, did not resolve the fate of its existing stockpile of highly enriched uranium, and left the most critical issues to be renegotiated over the following 30 days. In other words, Iran offered delay dressed up as diplomacy, and the Trump administration saw through it immediately. Here's the part that most coverage glosses over, because it requires stepping back from the daily headlines and asking a harder question. Why does this rejection actually matter beyond the politics? The answer is leverage. Specifically, it matters because Trump's willingness to walk away publicly, bluntly, without hedging, is itself a negotiating tool of enormous power. For decades, American administrations negotiated with Iran as if the goal was to reach any agreement rather than the right agreement. The result was a series of deals that Iran violated, delayed, or used to quietly advance its nuclear ambitions while the world debated the language of the treaty. Trump's rejection signals something different. It signals that the United States is no longer negotiating from a position of wanting the optics of peace. It is negotiating from a position of demanding actual change. When Trump says Iran has been laughing at this country, he is not speaking metaphorically. He is describing a pattern of behavior, stalling, enriching, testing, and smiling through the process that has frustrated American policymakers for a generation. The message now is that the pattern is broken, which brings us to the pressure Iran is actually under. Because rhetoric without consequence is just noise. The blockade changes that equation entirely. American military presence in the region has choked off Iranian shipping, and with it, the illegal oil sales to China that have been quietly sustaining Tehran's economy. Every day that blockade holds, Iran's ability to pay its soldiers, fund its proxies, and project regional power diminishes. U.S. Ambassador Matt Whitaker made this point without ambiguity. Iran is trying to wait America out, hoping that domestic political pressure or international fatigue will force a softer offer. But the administration's position is that the clock is not working in Tehran's favor. One intelligence analysis suggested Iran could withstand the blockade for months, but months is not forever. And the compounding economic damage is not linear. The longer it holds, the faster the pressure builds, and Iran knows it. What makes this moment even more consequential is that it is not happening in isolation. It is happening at the precise intersection of three major geopolitical storylines that are all converging at once. First, Trump is preparing to meet with Chinese President Xi Jinping, and the war in Iran is expected to dominate that conversation. China has been quietly absorbing Iran's sanctioned oil at discounted prices for years, and the blockade has disrupted that arrangement significantly. Xi wants the conflict to end, not out of principle, but because Middle East instability is squeezing Chinese energy imports and destabilizing a supply chain Beijing depends on. Second, NATO is undergoing what Ambassador Whitaker described as a fundamental transformation, a return to warfighting capability after decades of underinvestment. European allies have increased defense spending by over $100 billion, and a major NATO summit in Turkey this summer is expected to demand more. The frustration within the administration is real. American ships are holding the line in the Strait of Hormuz, and allied navies simply do not have the assets to help. The message to Europe is the same as the message to Iran. The era of relying on American strength without matching American commitment is ending. So what actually happens next? That is the question every analyst, every diplomat, and every oil market trader is trying to answer right now. The most likely scenario is continued negotiation under sustained pressure, a grinding process where Iran looks for cracks in American resolve, while the administration maintains the blockade and keeps military options explicitly on the table. Trump made clear he is watching Iran's nuclear sites with Space Force surveillance capabilities that can identify individuals by name, badge number, and movement. That is not a casual detail. That is a deliberate signal to Tehran that there is no covert pathway out of this, no quiet enrichment at a hidden facility, no shadow program that goes unnoticed. The second scenario, less likely but increasingly discussed, is that negotiations collapse entirely and a military component re-enters the picture. Prime Minister Netanyahu was unambiguous. The war is not over, nuclear material must be removed, enrichment sites must be dismantled, and Iranian proxies must be neutralized. Israel is not waiting passively for a diplomatic outcome. And Washington and Tel Aviv, despite the occasional strain in tone, remain aligned on the fundamental objective. The third scenario, the one Iran is gambling on, is that time and international pressure force a softer American position. Given the current administration's posture, that bet looks increasingly risky. What you are watching unfold is not simply a diplomatic standoff. It is a recalibration of power. A moment where the rules of engagement between a determined superpower and a regime that built its identity on defying that superpower are being rewritten in real time. Iran miscalculated. They believed the proposal they submitted would be treated as a serious opening, that the language of negotiation would buy them more time and more room. Instead, it was read, evaluated, and dismissed in language so direct it left no room for reinterpretation. Totally unacceptable. 4 syllables that closed a door and opened a pressure campaign. The outcome of this standoff will shape Middle East stability, global oil prices, Chinese foreign policy calculations, and the credibility of American deterrence for years to come. Pay attention, because what happens in the next 30 days will matter long after the headlines move on. Hey, thanks for tuning in. If you enjoyed this video, don't forget to hit that like button and leave a comment. A really positive, nice, and kind comment. That would be appreciated. And if you're not already subscribed to our channel, make sure to subscribe and turn on notifications so you don't miss any of our daily updates.